have a wonderful speaker coming up next, Dr. Jaclyn Lee, who will be speaking on culture, data, and people, the new imperative in business performance and employee experience. Dr. Jaclyn Lee is currently the Chief Human Resource Officer for the Singapore University of Technology and Design. She has over 25 years of HR experience and is viewed by the community as a thought leader in the areas of HR. Her diverse HR experience hails from senior HR roles held in manufacturing, social services, education, high-tech, and the security industry. She also has international and regional HR experience, having worked in 3 large global firms, such as General Motors, NEC Corporations, and Certis. Please welcome to the stage Dr. Jaclyn Lee.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me loud and clear? So glad to be here. My first time in Maldives. Maldives or Maldives? Maldives, okay. Yeah, so glad to be here. And in this morning, I was sitting in the session and just kind of realized, it's such a warm audience, and just feel the kind of warmth of your culture and of your people. Right, before I start the session, I normally like to, start the session to tell a little bit of a joke, start off with a bit of jokes. Now, because after lunch, all your digestive juices, everything has gone from your brain to your stomach, right? So you get sleepy, right? So one day, a human resource manager, passed on in life, and she, met St. Paul at the pearly gates of heaven. And as she was standing at the pearly gates of heaven, St. Paul asked her, "Do you want to go to heaven or hell?" So she said, "Well, that's an interesting question. Say, why you don't have to make a decision now. I'll give you a choice. Why don't you take a look at heaven and hell and you decide later?" So she said, "Why not?" So the angel took her to heaven, and heaven looked really ordinary. People were dressed in very poor, shabby clothing. They were looking very sad, and they were on the streets. It was very unexciting. She says, "Wow, I didn't imagine heaven to look like this." So the angel says, "Why don't I take you to hell to take a look?" And she went to hell. She had a shock of her life. People were drinking wine. They were dressed in nice clothing. They were singing. They were dancing, So she says, "Oh my goodness." So she says, "Why don't you, get down, we get the paperwork done. You can make a choice." So the angel took her down, and angel said, "So what do you want?" Strange enough, hell looks a lot more exciting. "I think I'll pick hell. Let's go for hell, So she picked hell and says, "Okay, let's get the paperwork done." And after that, the next day, the angel took her. "Now, welcome to hell." Opened the door, and she was shocked. Burning. People were, being burned in the pits of fire. She said, "What happened?" "Yesterday was orientation. Today is the first day at work." So don't do that to your employees, right? It became hell. Okay. Right. Let's talk about people, data, and culture. So this is a very interesting topic, and I really enjoyed the talk by the guy previously who shared about how he managed, people, manage culture, manage, alignment, and how he brings together, customers and employees. So I've been doing a bit of research into this topic, and I'm a person who works a lot with data and also culture. And kind of, if you think about it, people, data, and culture do come together. So let's take a look at what's the new imperative. Right, so we're working in very unprecedented times. Right, I really had a shock of my life that when I came into this auditorium, no mask. I almost freaked out because in Singapore, everywhere you go indoors, you have to wear a mask. So I said, "Oh gosh, it's a bit of a culture shock." But okay, I'm getting used to it. Right, so we're living in unprecedented times, and the new normal really calls for leaders and managers to really manage differently. Right, so we think about organizations and HR leaders. All of us here are HR professionals. We really have to review our entire employee experience to really see how that impacts our talent strategy. And I believe you're in the people business. Most of you are running, hotels, resorts, in hospitality, and the things you do really impacts, touch a lot of human lives. And in the places that you work, there are thousands and thousands of employees. So if you think about it, the ability for us to be able to link the employee journey with data, to thrive in a new normal is really going to be what's going to make our organizations very different. So how can we as HR professionals, I'm also an HR professional, how can we make a difference? Right, so let's take a look at, designing employee experience. So I like the fact that, the previous speaker was talking about ensuring that employees have the best experience at the resort versus a customer. So if you think about it, having great EX goes beyond the ability to integrate people with strategy, but it really requires a kind of a culture mindset, a change management, from one that's focused to not just engagement, but to cultivating a very high-performing organization. So I believe in the places that you all are working in, all of you are HR leaders. How can you work with your CEOs? How can you work with your employees to ensure a very high-performing organization? So a well-designed employee experience is about creating a better future, right? It is not about, okay, maybe tomorrow I think I will, introduce a new welfare program, or next week I'll come up with something, that pays my employees better. But it's really about alignment. It's really about how we can bring the whole design into the fabric of an organization. So, I really, really enjoyed the previous talk because, the sharing about how the resort is being managed, how he has aligned people and culture. So right now we call this, the convergence of the art and science of people management. So I call this people, data, as well as culture. So let me go into a little bit more details. Right, so if you look at the three imperatives, these are the three critical components. Why? So you ask me, Jack, why do you need to think about bringing people, data, and culture? So if you think about it, I hire someone that is really competent. Right? He or she comes into the organization. What if he or she cannot perform because he or she is not a team player? You can't align with the rest of the people in the organization, then you don't have performance. So culture alignment is so critical with the talent. And at the end of the day, do you need to measure performance, right? I'm sure all of you are running resorts. You have to make sure that you have profitability, you have revenue, you have happy, satisfied customers. So end of the day, the data is very important to substantiate people's performance. So we bring the three factors together. So let's kind of take a quick example at employee experience. So I call it the evolutionary journey of an employee experience. So we have now arrived at what we call EX 4.0. So at EX 1.0, it's about engagement surveys. So in the past, we used to be so excited. Oh, I've done this engagement survey. 70% of our employees are so happy. And then your CEO asks you, why is it that 70% are happy but you have 50% turnover? So what happened? So you realize that by the time you do that engagement survey, your employees have already left the organization. So engagement surveys are something that is kind of looking at the past. It does not look at the future. So now we have moved into now, EX 2.0 is about doing pulse surveys. How many of you are running surveys, employee surveys on mobile platforms? Excellent. So basically, pulse surveys are surveys, for example, I believe during the pandemic, many employers are very concerned about employee mental well-being. So how many of you have been kind of running surveys on employee mental well-being? You have done that, right? So you kind of find out how does it help you to understand what's happening? It gives you a sense of the pulse, right? So when things are moving at such a rapid speed, when the pandemic hits, we had to quickly find out what was the sense of the ground. So the pulse surveys are very useful to help you to kind of understand, okay, what's happening for this period of time. But of course, pulse surveys are pulse surveys. It does not go into a lot of details to find out what's wrong with the culture, what's wrong with the organization. So we move from EX2 to EX3, which is intelligent dashboards and action plans. So now the new systems are able to not just kind of look at data that's fed into the systems, but it can actually trigger actions. So for example, I'm sure some of you have IT systems that can trigger independent, we call it the IDP. Every employee has a learning plan. How many of you are in the learning and development function? So do your systems have this kind of ability to track learning plans for each and every employee? You do it? Do you do it quite regularly? Yeah, so basically in EX 3.0, you are able to look at dashboards, to look at, hey, the skill sets of this group of employees is not up to what I want it to be. It is where it is right now, but how can I take it to the next level? So now in EX 4.0, it's really continuous action, a response platform. So the newer computer systems in today's digital transformation journey are able to bring together a lot of components. So today we don't talk about HR systems anymore, but we talk about how the HR systems can pull together information from facilities management, from IT systems, from all kinds of systems to improve the entire employee journey. So I give you an example. So I used to have employees coming to me and said, it's wonderful, HR welcomes me. When a new employee comes into a company, HR says, welcome, it's such a fantastic place to work in, wonderful organization, and says, how come I don't have my laptop on my table on the first day of work, right? So it does not, it does not gel, right? So what we realize today is that HR alone, we can't work alone. We have to work with your facilities. You have to work with your IT. So you have to make sure that the first day an employee comes to work, he or she has all the resources. He or she has all the equipment to get the job done. So I have employees coming to me and say that, my goodness, every time I turn on my computer, it freezes for half an hour. Right, I have this kind of poor equipment to work on, So again, is this symbolic of an employee experience? No. So employee experience goes beyond just HR being nice, like the HR manager who chooses hell. You realize it wasn't the real thing. So whenever an employee comes on board, how do we all as HR practitioners make sure that the experience is wonderful on the day one? So it's not just HR, but how do we make sure that they come in, they're welcome, they're greeted well? How do we make sure that they have the right tools and equipments to do their job? How do we make sure they have everything? So it really, in EX 4.0, now we talk about really integrating the entire experience together. So we move from EX 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, where it's an integration of everything, not just HR. So far, so good? Okay, excellent. Okay, let's move on. So, Tony Fernandes, I'm sure you know who this guy is, right? He's the famous CEO of a group, CEO of AirAsia. So, Tony Fernandes said, employees come as number one. Okay. Customers come as number two. Isn't it a surprise? Right? Employees are number one, customers number two. If you have a happy workforce, they'll look after your customers. But if they're unhappy, your customers are going to be unhappy. So in today's, we call Industry 4.0, in today's world, we call it employee experience. So I have, how do you define employee experience? So there are three factors that defines employee experience. So the first factor is what we call the technological environment. So when an employee comes to your office to work, it's the tools they need to do their job, including user interface, your computer systems, your apps, whatever they interface with, mobile devices, as well as laptop or desktop computers. I think in your industry, it could be also tools and equipments that they work with. The physical environment is anything that can be seen, anything that can be heard, anything can be touched and taste, like desks, chairs, and meals. I'm not sure you guys have been to an office, Google or a LinkedIn office. You know what they do inside these offices? They provide a huge kitchen. They have like chefs, cooking meals for you. Why do you think they do that? Pardon? Yeah, if the staff are hungry, they can't concentrate on their job, right? But we found something quite interesting, that these are, again, part of the whole physical environment. So in the hotels that you work in as HR, how do we make sure that we work with our CEOs? How do we make sure that we work with our facilities? To make sure the environment is comfortable. The employee comes in, they have a comfortable environment to work with. So in the newer workplaces, of course, there's a lot of, now in Singapore, share a little bit about Singapore, since the pandemic has happened, right? Last year we had this, go back to work 50%, stay at home 100%, 75%. I got so confused every 3 months, Every time something happens, I had to remobilize my workforce. I'm sure all of you have gone through that, right? All of us had to execute this on the ground. So finally, the government said, okay, now everyone 100% back to the workforce. Guess what happens? My employees are complaining. Why are we asked to go back to the office, right? Everyone is saying, why? Then we said, okay, we will give you a day per week to work from home. Say, oh, I now have babies at home to look after. I have, all kinds of, situation. Now they want 2 days out of 5 days to work from home. So can you imagine, before the pandemic, we had 0 days, right? How did it become from 0 days to now 2 days becomes an entitlement? So we have all these kind of challenges to manage. So now with the reduction in office spaces, so I was talking to a CEO of our IT company. He told me none of his software engineers wants to go back to the office. Why? Why do we need to go back to the office? Why? I can do my software configuration at home. Oh, but you need to meet customers, but I go to the customer side. I don't meet customers in the office, right? So it ended up that none of his software programmers wanted to go back to the office. And in today's world, it's quite interesting. You talk to the 20-something, the young millennials coming to the workforce. Everyone asks, when I'm interviewing a young person who's fresh out of school, how many days per week is your policy that I can work from home? Is it 50%? That was not what they asked before the pandemic, right? So things have changed, So unfortunately or fortunately, as HR leaders and practitioners, we have to kind of adapt. Of course, you guys are in a sector where probably your workforce have to be on site because you're running a frontline service. But for a lot of the organizations like software companies, they are actually allowed to, right? So recently Google has forcing employees to go back to work, and there's a resistance. So now, if you go back to the physical environment, it's really so now that the office has changed, people are only going back to office 2-3 days a week. So how is it like? Is it hot desking? How is the office environment going to look like? And the third thing is really about culture. So culture is how employees feel when they're inside an organization, right? The structure, the leadership style, the compensation. So I believe that all of you work for certain kind of leaders, and they have a certain style when they come to work. So when you think about a person like Tony Fernandes, what do you think? What is the leadership style? Tony Fernandes. Pardon? Servant. So actually, I had a very interesting experience in AirAsia. One day I was taking an AirAsia airline, and I was sitting on a plane, and we were told to turn off our handphones. So I said, okay, let's put to silent mode or airplane mode. And this air steward came to me and started yelling at me and said, turn on your phone right now. I said, turn it off right now. I said, wow, that does not look like what Tony Fernandes would say to a customer. Sometimes, what you preach may not be executed on the ground. Okay? Right, so if you think about culture, again, how do employees feel when they're inside an organization? So I'd like to show so think about employees as consumers. So today's employees are consumers of the workplace. It's quite different. They expect a very personalized digital experience and the ability to connect with information like consumer-like technology. So all of you, I noticed a lot of young people, you like TikTok, Instagram? Whatever, YouTube. So would you like to go to office and touch a platform that doesn't feel like Instagram? When you have to go to the company computer systems, it feels like it was a computer system developed 50 years ago, right? So nowadays, employees also expect to kind of be able to interface with technology in the organization just like they will experience consumer-grade technology. So you think about it, this is really all the way from recruiting, all the way to, to the way they apply for a job, to every, their experience on the digital platform. So if you think about the management philosophy change, in the 1950s, the corporation was king, right? We had Henry Ford, we have Andrew Carnegie. In the 1960s to the 1980s, it's very hierarchical kind of leadership. So we had, the executives were king. Well, we had Peter Drucker, Jack Welch, these were the king. In the 1990s, the people were the king. Oh, Steve Jobs, it was servant leadership, right? And before the pandemic hit, it was team. The teams were kings, right? So the Netflix culture, the Google culture, but today what's happening after pandemic is about the community. It's really about community, family, and companies like Unilever, Varan, Whole Foods. These are the companies that symbolize really well-being, productivity, responsibility. So as HR leaders, how do we move all the way into this kind of concept where it's about empathy, trust, resilience, and really fostering a growth culture? Right, so in EX, right, a survey was done by Harvard Business Review, and they realized that EX has a great impact on employee engagement. When your EX is very high, your employee engagement becomes really high. And they also discovered that when EX is high, productivity increased to 62% in a survey of companies. Right, so I would like to show a kind of interesting video about the example of what EX means and how it relates to customers. Let's watch this video. Can we play this video? Okay. Sound? No sound.
Most organizations today, or the way I see it, are obsessed with the customer experience. They are so obsessed with that experience that they ignore the primary factor in creating the experience, which is your employees. Few employers treat their employees as though this were true. Your employees are your brand, and if your brand is a promise, your employees are responsible for fulfilling or delivering on that promise. They're the face of your brand, they're the face of your business to the customer. Many companies sprint right past that employee experience, however, the EX, on their way to building a customer experience, or the CX. And this simply doesn't work. The customer experience is a direct result of the engagement and the behaviors of your employees. Last fall, I walked into a supermarket bakery that was known for its pastries, and I had my mouth set on a fresh apple fritter. So as I stood at the counter, I overheard a supervisor chiding the teenage counter worker in the back room. Others that were nearby also heard the berating, so I rang the counter bell, and the young girl came out, and the first words out of her mouth were, "What do you need?" They weren't welcome, "How are you today? Would you like a free sample?" In fact, she didn't even have the courtesy to look me in the eye. So my first thought was to walk away from the bakery. But as I thought about it, I realized it wasn't the fault of this poor teen that was in front of me at the counter. My customer experience was a direct result of her employee experience.
Instead of wasting time measuring and sending out surveys to your customers and all of that obsession that most companies have about their CX, they should take that energy and those resources and they should invest them in their employee experience. When the employee experience is working correctly, your customers are going to have a great experience, and those Amazon reviews are going to skyrocket. As a boy, I loved planes. I'd have posters on my wall. Grew up near Hill Air Force Base in Ogden, Utah. One of my favorite planes of all time is the F-15. The F-15 has over 100 victories and no losses in combat. And many will say, wow, why don't we build more F-15s, right? Why do we spend money on new and improved planes if we've got a plane that's that successful? The secret to the F-15's success, however, isn't anything in that plane or even in the pilot's training. The secret comes from an old Boeing 707 in which they took a radar disc and bolted it to the top of the plane. And that plane they now call the E3 Sentry, and that plane flies in the combat zone and provides radar coverage for the pilots. They know where their enemy is as a result of the E3. And I think the E3 is like your employee experience. Your talent, they're like jet fighters. They're doing really cool things going 1,000,000 miles an hour. But without the right employee experience, they don't know where to go. The employee experience takes the time to align them with the mission and values and culture of that organization. So really, your employee experience is like that E3 Sentry, flying guard and helping guide the pilots to victory.
We found the video informative. So it's really the employee experience. It's really a direct result of the customer experience. So employee EX, now we call it EX is equal to CX. Okay? And I think this is so relevant in the kind of businesses you guys are in, the hospitality business, where customers are, your customers, your employees interface with your customers all the time. Okay? Right, so if you look at the 4 phases of the EX journey, history, in the 1990s, we focused on a lot of output. It's a lot of output, industrial engineering. And as we move on to the 1930s to the 1980s, it's really a lot of employee engagement. Salary, benchmark surveys, and we move into 2010 to today, it's a lot of focus. And finally, it's really about designing, end-to-end work design. So if you think about the work design, as I explained just now, when an employee comes in, what is the employee journey going to be like? At the moment, at the day, the person, even at the application process, when a person applies for a job with your organization, what's the experience? All the way to the offboarding process. So I actually implemented a process in my organization. In fact, I told staff, can we send a thank you card to every employee who has left the organization? They say, why? You know, even those that are fired, I say, yeah, do it. I say, but it's nasty. I say, just do it. You know, just a thank you card, not matter how they have left the organization. We unhappily, willingly or unhappily, just say a thank you, write a thank you card, and I will sign every one of them. And when we did that, it brought a lot of goodwill in the organization. Whoever left after that, they had nothing bad to say about us. So this is a very, inexpensive way of building goodwill. So if you think about how your employee journey, think about employee journey all the way from recruitment, from engagement with potential candidates, all the way to the exit process. It's an end-to-end digital process. We call it designing for success. Okay, so let's talk about culture. So I've touched a little bit about the people aspect, the employee experience, EX equals CX. And now we talk a little bit about culture. So culture, really in order to process in a culture journey, senior management, key stakeholders will need to be aware and be equipped with the necessary skills to achieve the desired culture change. So when I was working in the security company, in a company called Certis in Singapore, we had about 50,000 employees across the region. These are all security workers, auxiliary police officers, and we were going through a very rapid process of transformation. I remember at that time, we were transiting from a statutory board into a private company, bought over by Temasek Holdings. So at that time, 4,000 of our police officers were under a seniority-based wage system. And I had to cut salaries of 4,000 police officers with guns. Can you imagine? The guns are loaded. So I walk in trepidation every day. I'm not sure when I'll be assassinated. Okay, so can you imagine having to do the kind of culture transformation here? You guys stop thinking about the seniority-based wage system. We have to move into a private sector model. All of you will have a base wages cut. You're going to move to a higher variable pay and peg to performance. That was a very difficult task to achieve. Now, how do you do that? I think that kind of transformation can only be done if you have to work with your CEOs and you need to have a lot of dialogues on the ground. So the good news is I'm alive, standing here. Police officers are happy, and we managed to transit all of them out of the seniority-based wage system, but it took us 3 years. Work with the unions and the Ministry of Manpower, because if I don't do this well, the Minister of Labour is going to come after me. So many guns were pointing in my direction. Okay. So, but even in such a complex project, challenges facing can be done is really going to the ground, talking to the man on the ground, just going and explaining and getting them to understand the rationale why you have to do this kind of culture transformation. So that was executed very successfully, and today Certis is the largest security provider in Singapore. They have grown globally and it's doing extremely well. Right, so dialogue is important. Right, so culture agility in today's post-pandemic world is very important because it helps you go through turbulent times. The ability to transform culture, to change, and to adapt to the new environment. Transformation is the key. And when we were going through the pandemic in Singapore, people were complaining, every 2 months there's a new policy coming out, why we keep changing and all that. But we don't have a choice, right? We're a small country. I think, the Maldives and Singapore have something in common. We're not big countries. We're small economies, and being a small country, we have to be very, very agile and be ready to transform and move very quickly. So culture agility is the key, and I call this a future-oriented culture. Means looking ahead, not looking behind, but looking forward. And I really love Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft. He has turned Microsoft into a toxic environment, a company that had so much backbiting, they were stabbing their competitors. Can you remember at one point Apple and Microsoft were fighting, but now they are both collaborating on the same platforms. So Satya says that instead of killing your competitors, why don't you work with your competitors? Why don't you align with your competitors? It can be, this kind of partnership is called what we call a growth mindset. So I like what Satya is saying. So Satya says that the growth mindset is a mindset that says, I'm also defined by my curiosity and my thirst for learning. I buy more books than I can finish, sounds like me. I sign up for more online courses than I can complete, sounds like me. I fundamentally cannot believe that if you are not learning new things, nothing is happening. So basically, Satya says that everything, it's about continuous learning. A growth mindset is a mindset that is future-oriented, looks towards the future, and really promotes agility. So far, so good? Yeah. Excellent, thank you. Right, so data. So the last part of the imperative, so I've talked about the people, I've talked about the culture, and the last part is about data. I'm really passionate about data because I work in the field of data analytics. And I do a lot of, I train the Singapore HR community in using data science, computational data to look at insights, into people insights. And I think this is a topic that Afif and I have been talking about it, and he says, why don't you come and share a little bit about this area? Now, without getting into too much computational details, just a very high-level view, really data, prevalence of data is important because it helps us to be purposeful in the way we drive employee experience. It's very hard to drive employee experience without data. So workforce analytics is an important tool because it impacts business performance. So I'd like to show a quite interesting employee journey map. So this is a journey map that I mapped it out. So if you look at the journey from recruiting, so when you look at recruiting all the way to hiring, onboarding, work immersion and productivity, career progression, retention and post-employment, you notice that every part of the employee journey there's data points. So I believe all of you, some of you say, Jack, but my company is not using up-to-date computer systems. I'm still using Excel spreadsheet. Don't worry about it. I have a lot of SMEs that come to me and I said, start with Excel spreadsheets. Because, if you start gathering data, if you start using data, you start becoming a lot more computational. You start using a lot of very fact-driven kind of, use facts to drive people's decisions. So for example, if you look at the recruiting portion, you have things like brand data. I'm sure you're able to collect brand data of the places you're working in. And then how about things like sourcing channel data? Which are the recruitment channels that give you the best candidates? Okay, so these are some of the things that you can look at, and also applicant tracking data, okay? Along the applicant track journey, which are the applications that are giving you problem, We look at things like testing data. Okay, do you guys do some kind of assessment test for your frontline workers? Okay, so you're already using some kind of a data to do that. Pre-recruit survey data. So every one of my recruits that come in through my system, I put them through a survey of how happy they are with my recruiters. So they will tell me, my satisfaction with the recruitment experience is how much. And from there, I can use the data to see how we can improve the recruitment experience. So I believe at this point, at the recruiting side, I'm sure most of you would be able to collect this kind of data. Okay, so if we look at onboarding data again, the job, training orientation data is something that is readily available in your organizations, as well as post-interview survey data. And work and immersion means your transactional data, productivity data. Do you, in the hospitality industry, do you have productivity data? How do you measure productivity in hospitality? Any examples to share? I hear some rumbling. Maybe someone can share. Pardon? You mean the overall performance of the organization? Yeah, productivity of your workers, yeah. Yeah. Do you measure employee productivity? Okay, customer satisfaction. Okay, linked to your, customer satisfaction, does it link to your business performance? Okay, do you have kind of like employees, right? Do you guys track things like absenteeism rate and MC rates and all that? That's productivity. So if you have a certain, for example, I used to have security workers taking a lot of medical leave. Why are they taking so much medical leave? Can I do something to improve the productivity? So what I do is introduce a lot of incentive schemes. Can we put in schemes to help improve productivity so the MC rates come down? So I'm sure all of you are already collecting productivity data to a certain extent. Okay, so employee social media data, I'm sure you can see it. You can see your employees' social media data and know who is going to quit the job. I once had an employee in her Facebook post, she says, looking forward to new beginnings. What's that new beginning? And then she resigned after 1 month. Okay, that was her new beginning. So they go to Facebook and they go to Instagram and start telling you that they're going to quit. So you can actually track and see what they're doing, right? So social media data. And of course, retention is things like your engagement data, turnover analysis data, benefits data, employee assistance program, and post-employment, again, termination data, alumni data. So what I'm sharing is that you can use all these data points to help you improve the employee journey, all the way from recruiting to post-employment. So these are the data points. And I'll be happy to share a set of the slides after the talk so you can take a look at some of the examples. Okay, so basically we call this employee journey data, journey map. Okay, so I wanted to close it by sharing an interesting case about SAP. It might not be in the hospitality sector, but I thought it was quite interesting. SAP is a German software company. It's one of the best employers to work for. And since 2014, amazingly, the company has been able to measure the impacts of factors such as employee engagement, culture, even business health and culture on operating profit is quite amazing. They are able to do all the linkages. How they do it? Because what happened is that they actually interweave a lot of the HR matrix with business matrix. So case in point, if you look at this chart down here, so they actually have this thing called an employee journey, and they actually put the boxes of attraction, development, and performance. And the organizational foundation, which is the culture, it's really about leadership culture, having the right leadership culture. So in SAP, I did quite a detailed case study. Every manager has a net promoter score. Who does net promoter score here with the customers? Do you guys do net promoter score? Okay, so they do a net promoter score with their managers. So every manager's has a net promoter score. That means every manager employees will do a 360-degree feedback on you. And you will have an NPS score, and that's linked to your bonus. So that's how seriously they take this kind of measurement. And they also have entrepreneurial agile culture. They value inclusion and diversity a lot, and which is what Sarah was talking this morning about the D&I, a topic that I'm really passionate about. Operational excellence and human experience management. So human experience management is really about the EX. So if you think about it, so SAP is a company that's able to bring in the entire SAP's people strategy into the culture, and all these things are interwoven with the business. So what's the end of it is very fantastic outputs. If you look at the business health index, employee engagement year on year is all the way to 86%. Leadership net promoter score is 62, okay? And innovation index 79%, simplification of processes 58. They even have a business health culture index that's all the way to 80%. Retention rate is 95%. It's an amazing company. Right, so women in management, 27.5% is fabulous. In the Singapore University of Technology and Design, which is where I worked, it's a technology and engineering school. Guess how many female students we have in engineering? For diversity and inclusion. Guess how many female engineering students we have in our student population? Anybody wants to take a guess? Pardon? 80% is a bit too high. I would like to share with you our female engineering students taking engineering is close to 48%, which is very high by global standards. It's because we make a purposeful effort to promote diversity and inclusion, and promote women in technology. Lots of campaigns to get women into technology. So if you think about it, so what SAP does is really very exciting, women in management. So for those of you who are interested to see the SAP report, they have a very comprehensive report that talks about all these measures. Happy to send a copy along with the slides to whoever is interested. Okay, right, so I'd like to conclude my slides with 5 capabilities, HR capabilities. Now, I would say these capabilities are not new to all of you. All of you are competent HR professionals. But in this kind of post-pandemic world that we're living in a world of EX, in a world of EX equals to CX, in a world of data, in the world of culture, what are some of the key skills that can keep all of us abreast, you know, to help us cope with what is the new normal? So I've listed 5. Organization development and change management. First, HR capability. We must be able, HR professionals must learn how to look at old structures that are hierarchical, help organizations transit to a new way of doing things that is nimble, multidisciplinary teams, and also to a new way of working. We need to be able to help our senior leaders drive change. First capability, OD and change management. Second capability is technological savviness. Whether we like it or not, we're living in a digital economy, okay? And, you know, it is important for us to continue to innovate, to look at new ways of doing things. And sometimes some of my students and some of my friends tell me, but Jack, you know, doesn't have money to buy all these expensive systems. I say, who says it has to be expensive? A lot. The HR tech industry is a $200 billion industry, and there are a lot of small players out there, and it doesn't have to be expensive, okay? And you will need to be able to describe the talent strategy, see how the tech can help you to implement strategic HR initiatives. So first one is, can you guys remember? Change management. Second one is technological savviness. Third capability is business partnership. I'm sure all of you are already a business partner. So ability to work with business units. When I talk about business partnership, it's not like going to see your colleague and say, how's your day today? How was the weather yesterday? Did you have a good lunch? And I hope things are well. Bye-bye. So HR business partnership is really being able to sit down with the business unit heads and being able to work with them to solve people issues. So that means being proactive, being able to go to them with data and say that I think certain areas are quite alarming. You have turnover, there's some issues with your engagement. How can we sit down and work together to have a better outcome? So HR partners, business partners actually operate like professional consultants. So you are like a consultant to your internal business unit head. So third one is business partnership. Fourth one is design thinking, right? Innovation. So in order to have a growth mindset, design thinking is so critical. You've got to be able to learn tools in design thinking. So design thinking is nothing to do with technology. It's about innovation. It's about innovation. It's about rethinking our work processes. It's about putting in innovation and creativity in the workplace and using different tools, right, to give you a competitive advantage. Right, and the last but not the least is having marketing and social media capabilities. So I co-wrote an article with Joe Escobedo. We really talk about how to use new media. Whether you like it or not, your Gen Z, your Gen Strawberry generation are, what do they grow up with? Handphones. Whether you like it or not, the younger generation are going to be very comfortable with devices. So if your recruiting experience, if your employee experience is not digital, you're not going to catch the new generation. So whether we like it or not, HR, we must learn to have a little bit of social media capabilities. I'm not a social media person, but I've learned to get onto social media in the last few years. And my 26-year-old son said, Mom, you're now more savvy than me. On social media, I said, wow, bring it on. That's pretty good, eh? Okay, so the last capability is social media capabilities. So can we recap the 5 capabilities? First one. Second. Excellent. Third. I can't hear. Fourth. Yep, and fifth? Digital media. So if you can remember these 5 key factors, excellent. Go back and tell your boss, I learned this thing during the HR convention. Excellent. Every year you give me 3 days leave to come and attend this conference. Okay, right, so I'd like to end my sharing with a very interesting scenario of what 2023 is going to be like. 2023 to 2025, there's going to be new jobs in HR. What would be a new job in HR and what will it look like? Let's take a look.
The future workplace will require new human resource capabilities and skills that do not exist today. Meet Chow. She's an employee experience scientist. She uses data analytics to monitor the expectations of her company's workforce and suggest positive changes. Today's talent is connected, demanding, and armed with greater visibility into what makes a company a great place to work. CHROs and other executives need to think differently about experience as a competitive advantage, and Chow can help. Her company's expanded investment into artificial intelligence provides Chow with continuous, deep analytics for a multi-dimensional view of employee sentiments. These complement the traditional annual survey to tune in to common pain points. But an employee's experience doesn't just sit with HR. Chow partners with facilities, IT, and customer operations to uncover compelling data on employee and customer motivations. Chow is critical in helping her organization anticipate evolving expectations and shape personalized engagement strategies. To find out more about employee experience scientists and other new roles that are building the future of HR and what you can do today, visit read.kpmg.us/future.
That's an example of a future job, employee experience scientist. Some of you can aspire to move into this kind of roles. And well, think about, just remember in a Chinese saying, the journey of 1,000 steps, 1,000 miles begin with a single step. And with that, thank you very much. Any questions? Anybody has any clarifications? If not, please connect with me on LinkedIn. This is my social media aspect coming up. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jaclyn Lee. And that was a wonderful sharing on the benefits of integrating data into cultivating a high-performing organization. Your talk also highlighted very well on how much employee experience affects company culture as well, so thank you. And moving forward as HR employees and HR professionals, let's not look at people management as just a critical skill to have, but let's look at it moving forward as a science and an art that constantly evolves.